Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us for today's live session. This session is brought to you by the team at India's leading automotive events, Commercial Vehicle Forum and Two Wheeler Forum, or as we are more popularly known, CVF and TWF. My name is Rohit Devan, and I am the event director at both CVF and TWF. And for today's session, we have collaborated with Shogori to bring you a session which has been demanded by our audience time and again, and is on the minds of everyone in the auto sector. The title for a very popular session today is Electric Vehicle Technology Design, Development, and Adoption. And in this session, you will obtain a very well rounded view since we are being joined by senior leaders from across the EV ecosystem, be it OEMs, solution providers, startups, and also consultant and end user. So before we begin today's session, I wanted to take this time to especially thank our partner Chogori for supporting this session. Founded in 2007, Chogori manufactures a wide range of environmentally sealed and rugged connectors for harsh environment and outdoor applications. It has 15 product series and 3,000 plus standard products with UL, CCE, CCE, TUV. The company has 500 employees with 75,000 square feet of production space and an international industry standard laboratory. Chagori connectors and assemblies feature smaller size, lower cost, and higher current rating based on its patented NewSock content technology. Moreover, the company follows a lean manufacturing management philosophy. In terms of the structure of the session, we will first start off with a brief partner presentation and then have a panel discussion with few audience Q&A at the end. Other than that, we will also be running few polls during the session to keep it interactive and invite you to share your insights. Before we start the session, just wanted to share a small ground rule. I would request all the attendees to direct any questions that you may have to the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. I'm asking you to do that as it helps us refer to your questions in a focused manner. You can also choose to upvote these questions. This helps us in addressing the most burning topics. So please note once again questions in the Q&A section at the bottom of the screen. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you to today's presenter, Mr. Dominic David, who is R&D stroke FAE Senior Manager at Shakori Technology Company Limited. Dominic's professional experience includes working frontline with customers, project managers, and R&D teams around the globe. He has played a significant role in transferring new product designs to manufacturing. And before Chagori, has served as lead R&D at well-known connector companies in the Philippines, Taiwan, and China. We are honored to have him on board today. Over to you, Dominic.
Hey, good afternoon, guys, and thank you very much, Rohit. Thank you for our organizers, Three Wheel Forum and Commercial Vehicle Forum, for also gathering the experts to talk to us today. Okay, so I think I'm going to start the
Sure,
presentation now. Okay.
sure. You can share the screen.
Okay, let me just talk about a little bit of Chogori Technologies Company Limited. As Roy already said that in our company profile. So just to add more is that in January 2014 we were became the national standard interface in China for LED street lighting. Sugoi has been designated also the lighting supplier for the Olympic Games, World Expo, Asian Games, and University in Shenzhen. So we provide those connectors for their LED displays. Later on, we do have established our industry standard lab where we validate the connectors in the US car standard of testing. Okay, and then later on, we do the DFIMA validation according to the requirements from our customers. And we do have our contact technology patented a new SOC design contacts, and it also we have other patented uh, design for our connectors as well. So yeah, from 2013 we incorporated lean manufacturing in all our facilities. We are a certified IATF 16949 facility. It's an internationally recognized quality management system standard for automotive industry. So You can make sure that the connector being used are in par to the requirements in the automotive. Okay, just a little bit of milestones here. 2007 we started, and then 2008 here we joined the Olympic Games opening ceremony, giving using our connectors for the LED. 2010 Shanghai World Expo here. 2014 we were awarded a national high-tech enterprise company by the Shenzhen government. 2015 we had more awards in patent, and then we set up the electric vehicle business units and expanded our R&D as well. 2016 we were certified for IATF 16949. Okay, and 2017, because the company is now in IPO stage, we're going public. We do have investors on big automotive companies as well, such as Beijing Automotive and Shanghai Automotive. 2018, in addition to our North America and Singapore offices, we did branch out to Luoyang province in China and Shanghai as well. 2020, we started to build a new facility in Dongguan, which is going to be available already in a year or two. Okay, so let's talk about connector or connection systems for mostly on two-wheel and three-wheel vehicles. Okay, so just the basic requirements, talking about four things here. The connector should have high current rating, or current rating that is required by the customer, not just continuous current rating, because we have a lot of fluctuations in the system. So we need to consider the peak currents as well. Okay, another requirement is it should be reliable in a vibrating environment. Okay, it should be waterproof, IP67. It should be easy to use. For example, locking and unlocking. So a normal person should be able to remove the connector, even a lady who uses the vehicle. Okay, so in this page, you can see the most common issues or problem that most are experiencing for the connectors. There are issues like breaking up on the cable because they don't have a good cable connection and doesn't have an overmold. There are connections here that are not waterproof. Okay, and sometimes it's also being burned and melted the plastic around them. Like example, this connector right here, it's really burned. And same thing here, another one and another one. The plastic around the pins, it just shows that the connector doesn't have the capacity to carry the current, and it heats up. Okay, so not just electrical problems that we face. There are also problems mechanically, as you can see here, a connector designed similar to those kettle, bottom kettle connector designs that we call. And this is on the bottom of the vehicle, and the other mating pair is on the bottom of the battery. Sometimes when they mate them together, they hit the plastic and break, you can see. And sometimes similar design here that the pin themselves are falling off. So it's not well thought of. Okay, just to give you a little bit of a comparison from a traditional connectors and Chugori connectors. So traditional connectors, usually they only have a small current rating. Okay, they are not sealed, waterproof. Mating cycle is too low. Vibration also, it doesn't perform well. Okay, resistance, pull out resistance is very low as well. The size is big and it doesn't have signal transmission. As you can see here in the picture below left, these connectors are being used on many of the bikes or vehicles right now, which actually you can also use or see them at the back of the TV or computer. Okay, they also use this in vehicle. So Jaguar connectors, of course, we have a different current rating based on the requirement of the system. It is an environmentally sealed connector. It's IP67, has a good mating cycle, can go up to what is the requirement just to change the design of the pin. We test it on vibration. Okay, we tested it pull out also. the size is small because we make use of the small size of the connector face to put together a power contact and a signal contact as well to make it a hybrid design. So since it's a hybrid design, yes, it has signal transmission also. So okay, just to give you a design of a battery example here, it has two connector systems where one part of the connector goes to the charging, okay, and another one goes to discharging, goes to the motor controller usually. Another design you can see here, it's a single connector design on a battery. Can use it for charging and discharging, so it means that once you have used up the battery, you can just remove the connector, take it at home, charge it at home. Okay, so similar battery design here and others as well. So another battery design that you can see, it's like a suitcase style where the worker charges this overnight, and the other day when they work to deliver the post or the mail, they just put it inside the slot. And then this is actually a Pedelec bike where it's an electric, so the whole day they can deliver the mail. And this is, I believe, Belgium Post. So other battery design, as you can see, it's an arc design where it doesn't sit right below the vehicle seat. It goes into a slot that goes all the way to the front, making way for much more storage space. Of course, when we talk about battery, there is also this thing for charging stations. You can charge it at home, or there are some facilities now that you can pay where you just put in your used battery, okay, and then later on you can just get a new freshly charged one. Okay, so not just the battery design is different and becoming more and more better. So a lot of this changes in the design also in the scooter themselves. There are very interesting design right now. Of course, for the connector side, we need to go and cope up with the request. Like you can see here, it has a color blue and a different type of connector. Okay, so this is the Mate 60 here. Mate 60 is actually the second generation of what we were talking about earlier. The only difference about this, it has much higher mating cycles, and it features a lever lock where sometimes the battery design doesn't have that much finger access. So you put that lever lock to press it by your thumb and easily be removed. So an example of similar battery systems that is on the market right now is, if you can see, we have a small frame inside the scooter, and then it just connect the battery to the connector, and there's a lever right there. So you can still access and remove the battery very easily. So the charging station for that battery is this one, is a charging station that for this company provides on those convenience stores where bike users just go in and pay a fee, uh, give the lady or sales lady to get a new freshly charged one, and bring in the old battery that is already discharged. Okay, this one is another type of a connector design. It is much more smaller form factor. It's not circle. It's a rectangular type design with a friction based seal. If you can see that it mates by like this, and you just wanted to remove it and turn the lever up like that. Okay. So of course, different kind of size for connector. It is required for different size of bikes, like for bigger bikes that requires more power, such as big motorcycles and three-wheel vehicles. This is our Bango 100 that can go up to 100 amperes. You can see the difference that the cable already is big, and the pins as well. Okay, so of course, a bigger power need a bigger connector as well. Goes this Kunlun series goes up to 250 amps. So all those connectors I was telling you about earlier, those are more for cable and connection systems. So what I'm talking about right now will be a battery swap and replacement connector solutions, where one part of this connector sits into the vehicle and the other goes below the battery. So how this works is similar to this one, where a different charging station that is automated, you can see the connector inside, where you take the discharged battery, put it in, and then you can get new battery, a charged one from the other side right here. And then you just plug it into the vehicle and you should be good to go. Okay. So similar application as you can see here, of course, but different battery design is square one. But the same point, you put the battery in, the other port opens, you can charge or get a new connector. So I mean, you can get a new battery. So connector is inside already. You don't need to have any additional connection that you need to do. So this is a similar product which we call FC15. The difference about this is that you can see the head, it moves. So it has a aligning function. So whenever there is some misalignment from the battery to the charging port, it will align itself. As you can see, there are two guide poles that are going to be installed first to the guide holes, and then it will align itself, making sure that the pins will not have any knocking or breaking. It always have a perfect mating every time. Okay, so where is it going to be used? It's similar to this one. It's a combination of two systems, where a battery, you can charge it by cable, or another battery, you can charge it on the bottom part, where there is a bottom connector on the battery side. Okay, so for of course, using these connectors, you need to have a good contact. This is what we were talking to you about, the new sock contacts that has three different patents: Chinese, USA, and German patent. What is the special about the new sock patented design? So this is the new sock, and these two are the conventional or usually used pins. The advantage for new sock is that it has an hyperbolic structure, making it having more contact points. Okay, around 90 square millimeter. That is a lot in terms of contact points, and it will increase the electrical conductivity up to 55%. So it means once you have more conductivity from the two pins, it will have lower contact resistance, higher current capacity, and it means that you have lower temperature rise. It is going to be safe, more on testing of different temperature environment of our applications. Okay, so I think that's it on my side. Any information that you need, you can always contact us. It will be available for you to have our contact details. So thank you very
Sure.
much, guys.
Thanks for the insightful presentation, Dominic. I've heard connection problems are one of the key problems the market is facing. So thank you so much for shedding light on that. And now I would like to, initiate and introduce our speaker group to you. Firstly, I would like to welcome Mr. Saurav Kumar, who is the CEO and founder of Euler Motors. Euler Motors is an automotive startup focusing on transforming transportation in the country with electric vehicles. And Saurav is an innovator who's fascinated with technology and likes to work on driving advancements that help to make lives better. Next, we have Mr. Amit Gupta, who is the co founder and CEO of Yulu. His vision is to decongest urban traffic by providing a highly scalable affordable, if efficient, and green mode for the first and last mile connectivity and short distance commute. Amit believes that this is a large social problem and that needs to be solved with technology and product innovation. And prior to Yulu, Amit co founded InMobi, which is India's first profitable internet unicorn. Next, I would like to welcome Mr. Kelvin, who is an experienced connector specialist. He has been working in sales, marketing, and product development for the past 2 decades and has worked with various multinational companies. Currently, he's working as vice president at Chagori Technology Company Limited and is the managing director at Chagori Asia Pacific Private Limited since 2014. Currently, he's responsible for sales and business development in Europe, Middle East, and Asia Pacific regions. Our next speaker for the session is Mr. Sohinder Gill, who is the CEO Global Business for Hero Electric and Director General of the Society of Manufacturers of Electric Vehicles. In the past, he has worked in all the major functions in leading automotive organizations like Hero Moto, Escorts, Yamaha, Honda, Kinetic, and GK Group. Mr. Gill is someone who closely interacts with the policymakers, academia, technological institutions, certification agencies, and foreign partners to help create the right ecosystem for EVs in India. Also, he looks forward to mentoring startups who dream to make it big in the EV industry. Our next speaker is Dominic, someone you have already met. So just to give you a quick introduction again, Mr. Dominic David is R&D stroke FAE Senior Manager at Shakori Technology Company Limited. Our final panelist for the day is Mr. Keshav Chandra Sen, who is currently the project head EV technology at Ramkrishna Forgings Limited. He has worked for over 3 decades with Tata Motors, working across value chain, operations, heading quality, vendor development, and later taking key positions in after sales as well. In the recent past, he has also worked with Photon Motors and turned around MLR Auto as well. Finally, I would like to welcome Mr. Manoj Khurana, who is currently CEO at Numo, and he is someone who has over a decade's experience in management consulting, advisory, and operations in varied emerging markets with a particular focus on India, Middle East, and South Asia. Manoj, with his deep expertise in the EV industry, is a much sought after consultant, speaker, and influencer in the EV space. And we are incredibly honored to have him on board today as a moderator for the session. Over to you, Manoj.
Thanks, Rohit, for introducing everyone and getting a really, I would say, um, exhaustive panel together. I think if I just enlist the nature of panelists we have an OEM, we have a startup OEM, we have a consumer in Amit who buys these vehicles. We have a tier one supplier who already called out the kind of challenges we face on these components in Indian market and the potential solutions. We have a traditional company, a forgings company trying to make it to the new stream of electric vehicle components. Who else, right? I think so. It's really like a very complete panel to discuss the rise of light electric vehicles in India, both from adoption perspective as well as everything that goes behind technology design and development, right? So I think without much ado, I will quickly get down to we'll start at high level. I think where I would like to get everyone's views on where do they see India in terms of light EV adoption, especially in the light of, and obviously where they see it going forward as well. But I think in light of a recent news which came out, I think yesterday or today, that we will probably see decline in sales of electric two-wheelers this year. Probably the only major market in the world which will actually see a decline, no matter COVID or without, in terms of electric vehicle sales. So, right. How does that impact us in near term and long term? So we'll probably start with Mr. Gill, because he's probably comes directly from that space, and then we'll go down every panelist. I'll call out the names and get your view on where we are and where do you see the path going forward for light EV adoption in India.
Well, thanks, Manoj. I think we seems to have bottomed out in the recent months in the two-wheeler space and also in some other electric vehicles, particularly in the three-wheelers, which are made by professional organizations now. And even for cars, we have seen some good news coming out from Tata and like some others, right? So my personal view is that although things are not back on track, but we have bottomed out. But more encouraging and exciting is that we are getting a lot of tailwinds more than the headwinds now. And there seems to be a synergy in integrated approach by the policymakers, which is sort of giving a confidence to OEMs and component manufacturers to have a leap into this segment, which is so much required. So everything seems to be falling in place. We are not out of the woods. We perhaps as an industry would be doing as much as we did last year in the two-wheeler space. We wanted to double, we will not. But going forward, it will be a type of a recovery, which will be quite sharp, I believe, in 1 or 2 years' time. What is making it happen is particularly, you know, investors particularly, if you see, that's one of the signs one looks at. When investors globally look into India and they want to invest into EV sector, which means they have done their homework well. And despite so many other markets that they are already having an option of, I have seen so many of them coming to us and asking about our members and other OEMs who would be an interested segments for them. So one is investor sentiments. Second is adoption. The sort of a positive word of mouth out of the existing users is beginning to happen, and the negativity of the old, out of the lead batteries, sort of poorly made, sort of fly-by-night operators products, is weaning out. So more and more quality products are coming into the market, more variety is coming, more professional organizations like TVS, Bajaj, they have started giving their brand names into electric. So that's a big confidence booster also. So from that point of view also, I believe that positivity in that whole ecosystem is beginning to happen. And the last bit obviously is generic to two-wheelers, whether it is petrol or this. COVID has taught us a U-turn on public transport. And everybody now wants to do something on the personal transport, and perhaps an affordable personal transport, even if it is for a few years, if it is not a long-term bet. People want to have a bike, people want to have a vehicle, whether it is a second-hand motorcycle or a petrol scooter or electric scooter, so that they can get through this crisis that is looming still large on our face.
Got it. Thanks, Mr. Gill, for setting it up. I think the key takeaway would really be is, we are bottoming. I mean, the issues are going behind us, and now I think going forward, the sector will continue the trajectory it was continuing before 2020. Also, Amit, you might have noticed a lot of things Mr. Gill mentioned really bring me to you, right? Recovery, investor interest, more interest in personal mobility. But when we look at the segment you operate in, a lot of investment money is now pouring in exactly the kind of segment you operate in. Maybe the form factors are different in Europe and US, but the approach is very similar. So what kind of recovery have you seen in India, and how do you see your shared electric platform competing with the personal electric platform going forward? And also then a little bit on, because I remember when we met last time on the same forum, you called out that you had some issues procuring the products in India, and you had to really work with companies abroad to figure out and get you the products you need. Has that changed over time? A bunch of questions for you, basically.
So thanks, Manoj, for this opportunity, and thanks, Sohinder ji, for setting up the stage right. My thought process is related to what business we are doing, but if I just put together some facts on the table, so clearly India is one of the very large markets for electric mobility, and we all believe that it will be led by two-wheelers and three-wheelers. India is not a market for car for sure, and even within that, if you look at the theme which is getting transformed to electric mobility, it is mobility as a service, uh, which is the first buyer of all of these vehicles. And two use cases, big one. One is moving people, and another one is moving goods. Now, what I believe that what is changing in our favor is the unit economics part. So we all saw that when you are using petrol driven, let's say scooter or two wheeler, making a good business model out of that and providing the right affordable cost to the or pricing to the end consumer, it is challenging. But when we look at our numbers, when we were using electric scooters to move people around, then we were generating very good margin and very decent unit economics, which is important for this business model to happen. The story is no different for even moving goods, where you saw that how Delhi electric vehicle policy, particularly, they are now incentivizing and encouraging even Swiggy, Zomato's of the world to move a lot of their delivery on electric. Although we need to understand that what is the incentive or penalty if they do or they don't do that. But sooner or later, because of the economic model, I think this mobility as a service will be a big phenomena. And as per our estimation, uh, we probably are looking past more than we should. I think there's a hyper growth over there because we have now got to a critical stage where the pricing of electric mobility just makes sense for players like us. So I'm very, very bullish on the B2B segment for electric mobility, particularly the two-wheeler part. Now, coming to the questions, other question you were asking that how India ecosystem has changed over last couple of years. I think if you look clearly, COVID actually has given a much needed tailwind of effect to the electric mobility in the form of far more progressive policies and infrastructure support which government is now providing. And I think there's no U-turn from here. We just basically going to go up for sure. As far as our domestic manufacturing is concerned, as Sohinder mentioned, that it's good to see that not only Hero Electric, which has been a pioneer in this business, and then Ampere now joining hands with Greaves Cotton, which has much more sophisticated setup. And then Bajaj, TVS, and I'm sure a couple of more companies will launch their vehicle. And suddenly you will see that as a consumer, I have very, very good option at very competitive price. And that fear of, oh my goodness, where is my charging station? I'll live dry and I'm stuck at my road, etc. Those issues will also get solved very, very quickly. So I'm actually very much looking forward to 2021, where our own Indian companies will take this thing to the next level. I think Ether has started showing it. They have taken a high, a much bigger production facility. We think that even Ola will start producing something in India. So all of these things are telling that Indian two-wheeler industry, particularly on the electric mobility, will see a very huge growth in 2021, where the products are being created in India, which was not the norm, barring some pioneers like, as I said, Hero Electric and Ampere. So we will see very high quality products coming to our market, and it will be a motion which will be much bigger in 2021.
Got it. Thanks, Amit, for uh, sharing your views on this. I think, I mean, somebody asked on the chat, why India is not a market for electric cars, and I would want to address that later because I also think India is a market for electric cars. Honestly, if you look at the percentage growth this year, only that segment is growing and not other segments per se, right? Now, I think you also bring me to a very important question on, I was on the Delhi EV policy forum, I think last week, Friday. And even there, so we had a company called Lightning Logistics, which also runs a last mile electric uh, goods mobility in, I think, Bangalore. And they were still complaining about the quality of products, right? They still feel they're not getting the products they need, right? So sort of to you and to the Chagori team, right? How do you sort of take feedback from potential consumers on when you design your product? How are you doing? What are the things you're doing differently? And also coming to Chagori team after that is really how have you seen product quality, the mindset change over the last couple of years since you have engaged in India? Are founders, our companies more focused on improving product quality? What changes are they making as they look at launching next set of products? So sort of first with you and then the Chagori team.
Thanks, Manoj. So just quickly to add to, I think, the previous question, I'm like super optimistic about the EV future prospect. I mean, I think that the next couple of years, we'll see EV going on a sort of exponential rise. Right now, I know that there is a sublinear and these are smaller trends where you see these downward curves, but very optimistic.
I was waiting for you to use the word exponential because it really Euler really invented it sort of. So great, yeah, continue.
So coming to your question on the product, right? I think one of the reason why electric mobility has been, I would say, sublinear sort of growth in India is majorly because I think the product that are there in EVs were not at all competitive in terms of performance with their counterpart IC engine vehicle. And when people buy an vehicle, they are particularly they're first looking for the entire experience, and then they go after the attribute, which is the electric. So they care about the, let's just say, if they have to move cargo, then fleet owners are looking for a product that can take 1 tons of payload, overloaded condition in rainy seasons, rather than saying that, okay, I'm buying an electric vehicle and I will conform to only these constraints. So that's not how purchase behavior of fleet owners or individuals are. They are buying a vehicle, and that vehicle happens to be an electric. So I think over the last 3 years, what Euler did was we had a clean slate. I mean, we were before that. We used to build software. I mean, I sold that company and I started Euler Motors. So I had a clean slate. I didn't know much about the entire automotive design other than being an engineer, built vehicles in undergrad and grad degree. So what we did is we quickly prototyped a three-wheeler for a cargo application, and we gave it to the e-commerce hyperlocal companies around. We deployed around 200 of them in Delhi NCR. We took feedback from the drivers in terms of the speed. So we initially, for instance, we matched the speed to the Delhi traffic, and then but the drivers were not super happy if they have to drive like 4 a.m. in the morning, delivering, let's just say, milk to their some customer. We looked at the battery sort of degradation that happens over, like, your thermal degradation in summer conditions. We looked at the requirement of fast charging, some of the issue Dominic talked earlier, your connectors melting or breaking up, because when you're using the electric vehicle, so you can design one, but once you put it to the bigger entropy where everybody is connecting, taking apart without, like, or overloading the vehicle, your current requirement in the vehicle goes up. So we started seeing a lot of like product failures, and we looked at those, and then we rebuilt like a fresh vehicle, and we are launching that in next year, Q1 2021, where we looked at the feedback from drivers, your all of these customers, so customers from B2B space, B2C space. So in B2B, when I meant people like Udan, where you have heavy cargo loads and you can see much higher current ratings being used from the battery pack. We looked at requirements of e-commerce companies like Ecom Express, where they would look at volumetric payload, much larger distance. And we looked at hyperlocal companies like big baskets of the world, who would want to do 2 trips, 3 trips in a day, much shorter trips, very different sort of profiles. So we looked at different profiles and we mapped all of that experience back into the product. And I think having starting from clean slate, I mean, gave us that sort of like, open mind to reimagine the product. So in fact, like when we looked at designing the vehicle, we started it fresh design. I mean, instead of retrofitting an existing, which is typically most OEM which has done, is like they have taken what they have been developing, and then they retrofitted that for an electric vehicle application. So some of, I think those things came. I think your question around how we thought about the product design, how we took feedback, and obviously, like, once you run, so we have run around 7 to 8 million kilometers right now, and 3 winter, a couple of rainy seasons. So we have seen battery flooding up vehicle. I mean, recently being like in Gurgaon, I think it was all flooded, and like, I mean, we could see even boleros and pickup trucks like stranded on roads. So obviously, we were matching nowhere on the Indian road. All of that, like, gave us comfort in terms of what we were building. And I think until unless as an electric vehicle company, be it startup or a big OEM, until unless you build a vehicle that competes in exact similar performance as an IC engine vehicle, the segment won't take off. You might sell 100,000, few here and there in different niche, but to be able to get that on that exponential track, you need to solve for that.
No, I think I cannot agree more with you, Saurabh. I think this is what, in my limited capacity, I've been advocating from day one, that people don't care about electric, to be honest. And there's some people who do, but the starting point is they want a vehicle that meets their needs, whether it's electric, water, hydrogen, any other fuel, methane, it doesn't really matter. I think that's a good, I would say, starting point, starting from a clean skate. And but I think I'll come to you again a little bit on the manufacturing side. Building a proto small scale is okay, but in terms of manufacturing, what are you doing? So now coming to Chuguri team, I think you already heard a bunch of our colleagues, right, on panel, right? What do you think in terms of how the product quality focus is changing in India? Also, we hear a lot about India specificness, in battery, in connectors, and everything, in charging. Have you developed products which are India specific, or your global products you think are doing well in India as well?
Again, thanks, Manoj sir, for the questions. Very good feedback. Also, we got from Mr. Sohinder sir, Amit sir, and Saurav sir. So we are seeing a lot of pickup in activities. Q2 and Q3 was a major slowdown for this year, and I think there is certain requirements for FAME 2 in terms of the number of systems originally planned for launch. So we are seeing a very significant pickup of design activities at the moment, coming from OEMs, battery manufacturers, vehicle assemblers. We are seeing all this coming in. So like what Saurav sir also mentioned, the growth could be really exponential, suddenly getting into the next fiscal year. All the OEMs that Amit sir mentioned, we do work with them at the same time. So the last few years working a lot of these design requirements, expectations is actually getting higher and higher. May it be the mating cycles, for example, may it be vibration requirements, may it be controlling the amount of temperature rise. Because once you mate the connectors too frequent and too often, then there is a corresponding level of contact resistance going up, and temperature naturally gets a lot more hot. So as we work with them, they also test our connectors, some of which tested battery swap connectors up to 12,000 times, 15,000 times, and still meets the corresponding requirements in terms of the contact resistance level, as well as the temperature rise. As we move forward, we will expect a lot more stringent criteria. Saurav sir mentioned already the tough environment in India is very much the same as some of the Southeast Asia countries that we have put our solutions in. Some of which, just to take an example, in the presentation that you saw from Dominic earlier, we have customers in Vietnam. So they basically run the scooter, same thing, 0.5 meter water deep, and they expect still the connector to perform after they run through the entire street, fully flooded. So all these are part of the requirements to make sure that the connectors not only mated to meet a certain level of waterproof requirements, but when they are unmated, the expectation is the same. So they would want an IP67 in an unmated condition so that no water goes in. The connector is cheap, but the battery cells are very expensive. So all these expectations continue to rise. And then it also gives us a lot of opportunity to make the products better and better from generation to generation. So these are the constant issues that we face. And it will continue to intensify as the connectors potentially gets bigger for higher power. And right now, some of the moving forward trend on potentially smaller batteries like solid state, then we need to think about how to make it a smaller form factor and yet still meet the requirements. So these are the various challenges that we continue to explore, to develop solutions for the market.
Sure. Thanks, Kelvin. I think if I could sort of take one important point from what you mentioned and what Saurav already mentioned, is I think there is a continuous progression towards improving product quality. I think which which goes a long way in terms of adoption as well, because that has been a recurring feedback I've heard over the last couple of years. Now, Keshav, wanted to come to you and explore a little bit beyond just the battery and the components which fit along with it. Right, lightweighting has been I would say, an agenda in Indian commercial vehicle manufacturing beyond electrics as well. Right, probably that becomes even more important, and sort of you can also chip in after this, is because of the weight of the battery. The vehicle is becoming more heavier, and you want it to perform more on the load side and not on carrying the dead weight, right? So how is lightweighting becoming more important, or what kind of new materials are we talking about when we look at developing electric vehicles, especially for commercial use?
See, well said. That I like what Saurav said, that retrofitment thought process has to go away, and most likely people say that 2022 the EV cost will be equal to the vehicle cost, and that will seek exponential. Another term I can introduce as hockey stick growth. But coming back to the mechanical side, the onus lies on redesigning or rethinking the whole vehicle. You see, a diesel vehicle, the compression ratio was 22, a petrol vehicle compression ratio was 8. In that way, the vehicle was designed, so much of extra, what you call iron or extra material was given, because those were the need of that engine, or overload or vibration and roads like that. That means if you take a three-wheeler L5 category and the weight comes to 330 to 380 kgs, you need to shave off at least 100, because your battery itself is 35-40 kgs there. And there is no end to lightweighting in the sense, including the aggregates, because the aggregates need not be so big. You need to reduce even the suspension. If you need to reduce the body weight, the what you call the BIW, what we used to call in automobile time. So there is a huge scope, and there are no end of composites and special steels. At the same time, you see there are a lot of bearings, there are a lot of axles which are smarter, lighter, and more efficient. And these are the point which I thought in the lightweighting side or cost of ownership side I would like to address. Second point, one more thing I think, Saurav, you may like this point, that why don't we focus when we talk commercial vehicle, and typically we used to do that our Tata Motor days, earning per kilometer. We talk about TCO, we talk about cost per kilometer, but if the earning per kilometer is addressed, and that will take a lot of what Gil Saab was telling, what you call tailwinds, and this should be supplemented. I'm going a little off track there, bringing the banks inside, because you focus earning per kilometer, you focus the support to the entire ecosystem with banks, and of course, on the mechanical side, that you need to do lightweighting, as you say, forget the retro side of it. And more importantly, I feel very strongly that India is divided into two. One is very cost sensitive. One is now India is also what you call your earning capability improving. They also need a lot of features. Putting all together, I find that 2022 will be a positive year where things will really start looking up, and with all stakeholders chipping in, including the mechanical side, electric side, and others like banks, they all put together.
Thanks, Keshav, for bringing in another element. I think when we look at commercial vehicles, I think it's really important to look at ROI. I think the obsession with TCO only looks at the denominator. There's a revenue angle, a numerator angle as well, especially, for example, let's say in a four-wheel light electric commercial vehicle, right? Less maintenance, less downtime, more traction, more torque. So you need less time to cover the same distance, all of that, and then obviously the classic TCO on electricity being cheaper, right? So all of that should be taken into account, and not just the TCO. I think that's a very fair point. Now, sort of coming back to you, right? One is the cost reduction due to battery prices, but what about the cost reduction due to manufacturing, right? Do you see what kind of volumes do you think the market needs to have to bring those economies of scale to bring down the price, also because of manufacturing, and not just the incentives which government has, or the battery prices which keep going down? And do you see any major challenge for companies like you, because a lot of other startups as well, right, who have raised some capital and developed a good product, but still yet to show their prowess in manufacturing?
So I mean, good question. So I think, see, manufacturing is something we are still, as we are building, we are still learning. I think that's one of the thing Euler as a company has to learn how to manufacture, like, few thousands of vehicle per month, and that's something that we are very, very actively focused on. But given that EV has lesser number of components, and also some of the components have changed, like battery pack or your powertrain, a lot of these and your, let's just say, electrical electronics, so a lot of that is also disrupting the existing manufacturing. So I think being there on clean slate definitely helps, but we are learning. I think there was a point you when you were speaking with Mr. Keshav, you spoke about on the lightweighting. I'll also add on to that quickly. So I think for us in the commercial vehicle, where we are specifically focused on the cargo application, our battery sizes are fairly big, and we are in the range of like 80 to 90 kgs of battery pack. So we have looked at aluminium definitely as a material, and we have explored sheet metal plastics in some of the cases, where if we can get out of the stainless steel and to reduce the weight. But obviously your cost becomes a big concern. So we have looked at only putting like aluminium somewhere and like maybe top cover and plastic. So we have explored all kind of possibilities to reduce weight, and also to maintain, like, the cost where these vehicle typically are positioned at. We have also looked at different kind of electrically conductive adhesive, ECAs, or structural adhesive, which we call, to replace some of the structural members and maybe use bonding material. So those are the things we have done in general as a principle to figure out how to reduce, like, new materials to reduce weight out of the vehicle. Uh, but again, early days over there. In terms of, I think what was the other question? I think just to interrupt, what was the question that you had actually addressed?
In terms of manufacturing, what kind of challenges do you see in terms of scaling up
Yes,
manufacturing? Because
yes.
that as a concept also is new to India. Ether, Amit mentioned, is scaling up now. They got a new factory, but probably they are the only classic startup which have raised money to build manufacturing. Right? I don't know many companies. Right? So what kind of
Yes.
challenge do you see, and how do you want see you could address them?
So so just let me give you our like personal sort of experience, right? So when we designed, so you scale up your manufacturing when you have a solid product market fit, right? At the right cost with the right financing, and customers are also, they feel that, okay, this is a product, if they buy, it will run for 5, 6 years, or maybe 8 years. The batteries will outlast the vehicle, or you will have an alternative ways where you can swap out the cells, and if it's a fixed battery pack solution, once you hit that, and typically for any company, that's a 2 to 3 years sort of design development, prototyping, testing, bringing it back, redeploying. Then once you hit that, then you start thinking about, okay, now getting, how do I go from, let's just say, tens and twenties of these vehicles per month to few thousands of that, like, per month. At least in my mind, that's how we have thought through. Instead of looking at like how do I manufacture thousands of it for per month from day one, we just first get to a product. Once we have now that achieved that product market fit, and we feel that we have a product that can last 7, 8 years, the customers are going to be happy using it. And the point that total sort of cost of ownership or earnability, we have looked at those points, and we have proved that the higher upfront acquisition cost is balanced by the savings and earnability. Now we are getting to a point where we have started looking into manufacturing, and that's where, when we started looking at that, and obviously while we were doing 20, 30s of those vehicles, let's just say, in a month, we used to collect these feedbacks. What are their pain points? So let's just say in our battery pack, and just give you an example, we had a big matrix which used to weigh around 50, 60 kg, and these are lithium ion and best of the energy density cells. But while you're manufacturing, the assembler, the folks who were assembling, they were not super comfortable lifting and putting it out there. So we had to think about how do you modularize it so that while you're manufacturing, some of those challenges can go down. And also how can you think about, let's just say, future product form factor where you can take these modules and start taking them in. So from a manufacturing standpoint, and the second thing is the capital, your cost, your capital requirement, your massive capex requirement. Be it in right now we are done with, let's just say, proto tooling, but once you start thinking about 10 years or 100,000 sort of numbers, then you're thinking about your tools that can last these many years, your hardening of tools, and then maintenance of tools. So all of that, your capital requirement, capex requirement, your factory design, all of that starts to come in. So I think you would probably hear us getting into bigger manufacturing factories by next year, where we'll start thinking about how to get into some of these space. Your volume thing that you talked about, like battery prices coming down, I think in the early point, and the kind of volume that are required over there. What we have looked at is, and these are our conversations with all the tier one cell suppliers in India, they're at least looking at like 30 to 40 million cells where they can hit, let's just say, something around $100 per kilowatt hour, or even a bit lower than that for India market. Even though those numbers have been hit globally, those volumes are not hit collectively for India, and hence most of the cell suppliers are still not sort of like, flexible on those prices. So yeah, I think scale will solve some of the problems, and I think manufacturability will hopefully come around that only.
Got it. I think, Rohit, that's a good segue for our first poll question, which is around, when do we see the ecosystem become sort of more comprehensive or full-fledged in India? So I think I would request the audience to sort of share their perspective on this. I think now I want to sort of switch the gears a little bit and come to get a consensus or get a view on where does the group stand on battery swapping. Because hearing you, Saurav, it seems you are not really building your products for swapping, that the kind of batteries you're talking about. Amit already is pro swapping. I think the Yulu platform is built around swappable batteries. Mr. Gill, what is your view on swapping, and where does, as Hero and as SMEV, has there been any sort of a pro or against view on swapping? Where do you stand on swapping, both as SMEV and Hero Electric as an OEM?
No, the policy front, we are very much in for swapping, and we have been, although there are pros and cons, but it is worth an experiment is what we are telling the policymakers. So it has to be done cautiously, but there is a definite roadmap available, like what Amit is doing or what Ola is trying to do, or for B2B particularly, it's a good beginning to do. So from there on, it can go to B2C. I'm talking about two-wheelers here. For e-rickshaws and all, it's already there. Like this way or that way, they are doing some sort of a swapping, whether it is a jugaad or a manual operation. So that needs to be professionalized or something. Then experiments from Sun Mobility and some other of our members, they are beginning to get traction in places other than Bangalore. Now they have started Chandigarh, Jaipur and all. So it's an experiment which doesn't have any global benchmark, that's why there are a lot of pros and cons. That's why there are counter views about it. But India has to find its own solution. So from their point of view, it certainly has a place in terms of vehicles. Perhaps it will be on the base level vehicles, where battery is not a differentiator, where the economics is more of a governing factor, and people don't want to own an asset, which is a beginning thing for a youth. So from that point of view, swapping will do well in two-wheelers and three-wheelers. Obviously, taxis can also adopt it. Personal cars may or may not happen. Buses, even Chetan is trying to demonstrate, and on a fixed route buses, it's a possibility. So overall, it's a great thing to happen in India. Well, it will take time because density required is very high, especially in the B2C segment. From B2B, you can start it. So I believe very much that we have found a right spot. Now we have to get better technologies. We have to get better batteries and better systems, and a little bit of education also to the customer, how to handle batteries outside the vehicle, and have enough checks and balances around the battery so that they are not misused, abused, so that enough ROIs are generated for the guys who are swapping.
Got it. Just a follow-up for my understanding. Have you launched a product on swapping, or you continue to still have plug-in charging these products?
I lost you in between for 5 seconds.
Have you launched a product on swapping, which is built on swapping platform?
See, all our products have portable batteries.
Okay. Yeah.
100% products today have portable one battery. For example, the low speed to the highest speed, they have either 1, 2, or 3 batteries, but all are just one battery. So it's classic example of swappability. As soon as it is available, my products are there. But we are going to strengthen it further, because swappability, like Jaguar is sitting here, means a lot more to do with connectors, lot more to do with the wiring harness, lot more to do with the dust handling part of it. That is the thing that we are going to get. We had a very close collaboration with Ola, some of our members, before they sort of put the project on the backbench, and perhaps somebody else will come up equally big, having faith in swapping, and many of the products from our members will be ready for that.
Got it. Amit, wanted to get your experience on swapping. How has it been? You continue to feel that is the solution for you, and what kind of challenges do you still face on day-to-day basis when it comes to using swapping as the business model?
Thanks for that. So as I was saying that Mr. Sohinder mentioned that for the B2B cases where you are providing mobility as a service, either to move people or goods, swapping is the way to go. It is extremely inefficient and expensive for you to take the vehicle to a charging station or to your wherever to charge and bring it back to the area of action. And that's the rationale for that. India, being a unique market, will have to figure out its own charging network and system. I think the one big worry I see today is there's no standardization in terms of the geometry and the specification. So while there are several OEMs who are figuring things out, but each one of the OEMs have the different form factor, and unfortunately, especially in a small form factor vehicle, the space is going to be constrained. So I cannot have, like for example, my Yulu Miracle is very specific battery. I cannot actually take a battery which is, let's say, done for Hero Electric low speed scooter. So somewhere we have to converge that these are the standard dimension, at least to start with, we need to work on, so that industry will grow from there. And then we are okay developing our own private network for charging using the Kirana stores. So we have been able to place our charging station right now, just catering to use case. And in future, if there's a value, we can collaborate with an OEM who is kind of accepting that, okay, the Yulu battery format is also okay with my own scooter. And then the ecosystem can actually go and grow. The type of challenges we have been facing, clearly, government has this interesting policy where we can get subsidized rate for charging of these battery. So there's some special meter as a policy in Karnataka. I think it's also there in Delhi, etc. But the fact of the life is that when I'm working with a Kirana store, they do not have that meter. So in a sense, I am paying a commercial rate, which is the highest in the country, to charge these vehicles. So maybe there's some work needs to be done where we can prove that, okay, this energy was consumed in charging for this battery for electric mobility, and get a subsidized rate or a right rate. I think the connector is a real problem, and I agree with Dominic that a very good quality connector has been missing. At Yulu, we started using another company called Higo. Also, I know our team was in touch with their team as well, and that needs to be super good. We burnt our fingers, at least in the first model, where we had a very traditional mating connectors, and they were not only poor quality, but also we were not able to communicate from a data angle. But now our new platform, we have Higo connectors, where we are able to take this information in and out. And I think there's a huge improvement over there as well. So charging station is okay for us, as I said, because we have a right scale. But I don't think so. If we are talking about a larger agenda for electric mobility in the country, solution like Yulu will scale, because we just created for our own use case. So we need to start from that. Okay, this is the standard in terms of dimension and certain output, just for the low speed. Don't worry about the high speed to start with. And then OEMs come together, they say, okay, this is what I'm accepting. And then lot of ecosystem can come around and then make this process much more efficient and scalable for everyone to happen.
Got it. I think Mr. Gill can tell you a couple of things about how easy or difficult it is for OEMs to come together and
Not
decide
easy.
on something.
I know it's
But I
not
think,
easy.
yeah,
I know it's not easy. But at the same time, if we need to see this ecosystem growing, particularly around the swappable battery infrastructure, we need to think of AA, AAA sense. Otherwise, it's not going to work at all.
yeah. Mr. Gill, do you have a comment, quick comment before I go to Saurav? Sure. Saurav, coming to you then, you are the black sheep here in terms of swapping. Why not swapping?
No, so I believe that India will have both charging and sort of fixed battery and swapping. I know that's a diplomatic answer, but I definitely believe that that's going to be the case because see for the larger vehicles and when we talk about three-wheeler and specifically oiler, we are talking about three-wheeler cargo, right? And there your payloads that people put are in 1000 kg and your current requirements are let's just say 48 volts. It peak sometimes goes to 200 to 300 amps, right? Versus if you're looking at a passenger vehicle, there are like 3 4 people and that's roughly let's just say 200 300 kgs of load, and that's almost like no load condition if you are designing a vehicle that's like 5 600 kgs, maybe. But and then you have two-wheelers where your battery requirements are your battery sizes are like 2 to 3 kilowatt. Three-wheelers roughly is between 6 to all the way till 10 kilowatts. Four-wheelers are a bit higher. Why? So you have these varied sort of battery size requirement and then different current requirements and different sort of life cycle and all of these requirements, right? Why when I look at like why swapping came, I think there were a couple of reasons for it. Those reasons were the point was that there are not enough, let's just say, infrastructure in the charging station. B, the point was around charging will take a lot of time, swapping is much faster. uh, but in applications like for instance in cargo, people do have like 5 6 hours of overnight time and they can charge, so we were not really bothered, and your charging technology is also improving with time. So what it took, let's just say a few 8 to 9 hours to charge, now is taking 4 to 5 hours to charge. And then Euler has have been working on a lot of thermal cooling, and we have been able to even do an hour to 2 hour to charge. Obviously there are questions around thermal degradation, which are continuously testing our battery packs to improve that. And so as technology will mature, some of this will get solved. The larger question around why it was happening, coming back to that, right? So you have these uh, point around that the battery packs will weigh more or it will cost more. All of that is a technology problem, and literally, like, I mean, honestly, like when I wanted to build a company, I didn't want to fight a technology curve, right? I mean, think about smartphone and feature phone time. Like I remember I used to have that Nokia phone where you had this battery and I used to keep another battery because like you're talking to a phone, runs out, and then you used to swap with another battery. Over a period of time, your battery technology improved. You had a much larger battery. MAH now charges in similar amount of time. I believe, and it is still like it's commercially viable, and so I believe that some of that will also happen here, where you will have, because battery pack energy density is improving, your weight is reducing, your cost is reducing, so you will be able to fit. But there are applications like in two-wheeler where it is like when you have let's just say smaller battery capacity, you can swap one or two or three battery packs, two-wheeler, three-wheeler passenger, it is okay. But when you're dealing with 8 to 10 kilowatt hour or 14 kilowatt hours, then you have to think about maybe a robot swapping, then your capex cost starts to increase. Otherwise, if you want to build a smaller pack that people can swap, then you have to think about 6 to 7 of these smaller modules to swap. So all of that starts to become a challenge when you start thinking about applications where Euler is, for instance, operating.
Got
So
it. Got it.
I believe both will work. No, I think both has its own advantage, and yeah.
Got it. Thanks. Rohit, I mean, before I move to Dominic, could you share the results from the first poll and also then put out the second poll? Yeah, so yeah, people have a categorical answer. So 5 to 7 years seems the most appropriate time. So to 2025 is when people think we'll have a, when we say full-fledged ecosystem, we're talking about like fairly high level of localization in terms of manufacturing, fairly high level of adoption. I think, yeah, pretty positive. Just now coming to you, Dominic, I think, and I think I'm picking up from what Saurav mentioned, right?
Yeah.
Can we? Do you think swapping is an intermediate solution, especially because you also earlier mentioned that solid state battery is coming? Maybe today we can't charge two-wheeler at in 1 hour, not even one. I think the fastest we have is 1.5. But tomorrow, if we have a battery, for example, there is a company called StoreDot in Israel, which claims to be building a battery pack which can be charged in 5 minutes, right? So when we get there, assuming when we get there, do you think swapping will have become so pervasive that people probably will continue to use swapping, or swapping is just an intermediary solution? And once we get there, we will really be in the fast charging zone, both for even for smaller vehicles. And what does it change in terms of the kind of technology you are developing at Chakori?
Yeah, I think for battery swapping in terms of connection systems also, um, the advancements that we have or what we see right now, there's a lot. And in systems, in battery swapping system, is it in terms of connection, it doesn't have much, a lot of impact. It only impacts once we do have a requirement on battery capacity, for example, and then how much power needs to be supplied into the motor. So these kind of things really needs to have a much more collaboration with the engineers of every customers that we have. And in terms of adoption, uh, it is something that the government uh, needs to think about more to do in infrastructure side as well. So it's a kind of bit tricky to say something right now, but on our business side, getting a lot of this request of battery swapping solutions, it ramped up. So it is a good positive view from us in this connection systems for battery swapping actually. So
Got it. And
yeah.
is this interest coming from only South Asian countries, or do you see some of the Western countries also looking at swapping as a solution? Because traditionally they have been talking about the plug-in charging, and now in Europe, at least for
Yeah.
cars, they talk about wireless charging as well. Do you
It
see?
is yeah, it is global. It is global. We do have customers coming all the way to up to France, actually. So
And
it's a good market. All of this new customers coming in, also getting asking questions on how much our connector can perform, and the vehicle system varies depending on where it's going to be used, how it is going to be used by, is it for personal use or for commercial use, how big it is. So it is much more on a collaboration, and it is unfortunate that we don't have a current standard product yet. So since these different types of systems are coming in, the only disadvantage is that yeah, we need to create a new one for them. So some systems, okay, we need a power and a signal. So signal where is it going to be used? Like they want to use a CAN bus, so it adds two signal pins. You want another pin for a wake up line, for example. The other pin for a proximity sensor, something like this. It can add up, and different types of system we need to cater. So this is the only advantage in a connector industry. We need to go through all these requirements from our customers.
got
Yeah.
it, got it. That's helpful. Rohit, can we pull up the results for second survey as well, because that will lead to, yeah. So we asked the attendees what is the biggest challenge, and infrastructure. I think Dominic, you were just talking about infrastructure, and people sort of
Yeah.
agree with you, right? I think you're right. I think that's a call that has to be taken. Where do we invest in terms of infrastructure? Because I think what's happening in India is, let's say, for example, on car side as well, we have not really chosen one standard, which means there's more investment which goes into setting up charging. We already, the case for the business case for charging is already hard. So by not really betting on something, well, it's democratic. At the same time, it also sort of affects the potential ROI which customers or investors could get. Right.
Correct.
One thing which since I think we are almost at time, I wanted to keep some time for questions as well, right? What this question I told myself a few months back that I would probably not ask it again, because I was pretty confident that EVs will really do well in India. But COVID happened, right? Is there anything else which government needs to do to push it? My broad sense is at high level, I don't see many options left in terms of incentivizing. But I think still would love to hear from the group, because you guys are closer to the ground. Is there something like really big which is left? Small things, understand, but is something path changing, path breaking, which is still left to be done by the government, or it's purely a private sector play here on?
So whom do you want to answer?
Mr. Gill, you are best placed to answer this. I think others can chip in after that.
See, okay, so my hypothesis is that everything isn't falling in place, but we need the first set of, say, 5 million electric two-wheelers, three-wheelers, and taxis to be on the road to create that sort of a positive word of mouth in a short period of time. Left to itself, it may happen in 5 years, 7 years, 10 years. But if we can make it happen in 2 years, everything else is resolved. There comes the policy, like, fine. So from policy point of view, only one thing that is missing perhaps is to accelerate or catalyze this from 5 years to bring it to 2 years. How can it happen? There's a bit of a sort of a heavy hand of mandating that the government can do. That's the only point missing. So perhaps I believe after the farmer thing, it will be further very difficult for government to take such mandating steps. But yes, if businesses can be told not to pollute and to convert to electric, it's a common sense. And businesses, I means lots of deliveries, lot of courier services, lot of vehicles which are running on businesses. They can easily be told, okay, we have given enough. In the next 2 years, convert 50% to electric. That will add up to the kitty of this 5 million, of in addition to what OEMs are trying to do, component makers are trying to do. Because this vehicle needs word of mouth. Electric vehicles need the confidence of somebody having used for 3 to 4 years before the mass jumps into it. And this mass is getting drifted as the time goes. And we need to just accelerate it. And that's one formula from my side, is just mandating.
Got it. No, I think I was reading this morning that every 11th vehicle sold in Germany or some other country in Europe has been electric this year, right? Which is, we're talking about a burst. We need a burst. We need to see a lot more of these. And I think regulation, I completely agree. I think regulation of some shape or form, whether it's what California does in terms of ZEV credits, or what China does in NEV credits, or what Europe has done in terms of emission related. So they've specified the maximum emission a vehicle could have, right? So all of them. But at the same time, I think the point I was trying to make earlier was that we could not even bet on one charging standard, right? So to expect that a mandate will come is, I don't know. I think baby steps. We could start with baby steps and fix some standardization issues before we get there. Amit, you sort of your inputs on what could be done.
From my perspective, if you look at the last year's vehicle sale on electric side, a large portion of them were low speed, and I think directionally around 80%, if I'm not wrong. Unfortunately, none of the policies, whatever government has announced so far, is actually helping that cause. If we are trying to say that, okay, my incentive is for a lakh or lakh plus vehicle, I don't understand that where someone will be just moving and flocking towards that vehicle, even if there's a subsidy of 10, 50,000 rupees, because you're solving for a very different use case. This is where I think government probably needs to do more by putting some standardization. I understand from government's perspective, and we have spoken with them, they are worried that someone will just rotate the same asset and take incentive multiple times. Maybe they can adopt a policy like China, where there is some registration, it is free of cost, and you can just make sure that there's a win number coming from a reputed brand OEM. So those things can be solved, but I think a demand side incentive coupled with manufacturing side incentive so that we get to a right level of scale on manufacturing, which will lead to a better quality product, and then you have in a positive vicious cycle. So customers have more and more incentive to buy these vehicles. Manufacturers have invested into right type of R&D plus to start with high quality product, which will only come when they have advanced machines and tools to make one. And then we are not looking back. And added to the mandatory part on the delivery, where certain amount of fleet has to be electric, then we are not looking back from there. And it is very much doable. We're not talking about a lot of money. If you put it together, we're just talking about maybe less than $1 billion to create a hundreds of billions of dollars of industry in India.
I think I think I have a related view on this, not exactly what you shared, but I think what I feel is government needs to be a little more generous. I mean, they have put the money, they've earmarked the money, but the rules around using that money are very, very strict. I mean, Mr. Gill will agree with me. This metric, that metric. I mean, how will the burst happen? How will a lot of transactions happen on if there are so many small rules? I mean, let it be slightly. I mean, let the tap be open wider to begin with before you close it down. But I think the things like Amit, you mentioned the low speed is not allowed, and then the minimum range. I mean, I completely don't understand, honestly. Like, I have worked in those corridors. I used to work for a government agency earlier. Work closely with DHI on the policy as well. How can you specify a minimum range of 80 kilometers? That's a choice between the consumer and the OEM. If you make a product which is not meeting their range requirements, it will not sell. If you are making it, it will sell, right? But so there's some of these things I think have been one entity chartering into others' domain. To be honest, I think maybe Mr. Gill. I mean, I'm sure you are already discussing how to sort of make it less onerous. To be honest, like localization, for example. I mean, completely understand the need of localization. All of us, I think, are on the same board, including Chagori would want to probably localize their products in India as well. Right? But localizing needs scale. I mean, if you have such a tight tap to begin with, the scale will not come. Companies like Chagori will think, okay, we want to manufacture, but where is the volume for us to manufacture? So it's a loop we get stuck in, and ultimately what happens is the policy which has 10,000 crores earmarked will go from 3 to 5, 5 to 7 years, and still not be used. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm 100% sure the money will not be used in 3 years. I think anyone who understands the policy will know it's not going to be used, right? And then we'll extend it on last day. The localization norms, which will kick in like 23 days before the launch of the policy, Mr. Gill. If I remember, 8th March, the policy came and you have to localize from 31st March.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, so I think at high level, things have been done, but I think on implementation, there needs to be some generosity which needs to be shown. I think I'll quickly come to questions now, some questions we have on the panel. I think somebody asked about the car. Why is India not a car market? Which is, I think, quick response from everybody. Why do you think 30 seconds? Why do you think India is not a car market? And then I'll address it as to why I think it is a car market. Amit, you could start, and then
Yeah,
Amit.
sure, absolutely. So if you look at even before electric mobility was becoming important, India had only 25 cars for every 1,000 people. Compare that with US, 850 people having car out of every 1,000. Even if you look at our condition with 25 cars per 1,000 people, look at the road, we don't have space to drive. And if you put them in mobility as a service, we all know why Uber and Ola, their rides number got tapped when the demand side incentive dried down. So India just cannot afford car, period. with a type of demography, type of GDP, type of earning we've had. So let's not waste our time in car. Yes, cars are there for privileged people who may buy them and who may ride them as a service model, but it is certainly not for 80% of our country. So that's my easy answer to why not car. And at the flip the equation, which is not being asked, two-wheeler at the same time, 80% of the vehicles are two-wheeler. We get it. Our road space, our culture, our pocket, everything just is aligned for two-wheeler, and we should just focus our all of our energies on small form factors. That's what as a country we can afford at this stage.
Sure. If anybody has additional points to add, please feel free to share. Otherwise, I'll get to my answer.
Okay, so let me add, like, I think my thought, but it is, I think Amit, you put out like something that I wouldn't have said, but very interesting point. I'll talk about why India is not building electric car, and from a car market perspective. I think my thinking when we started Euler, our thinking was very simple, that like, when people buy car, they typically think of like, one day they would drive within the city, some days they would go out, and so you need range of like, let's just say 200s to few, let's just 400 500 kilometers. Your upfront cost of the vehicle increases significantly. Your ability to sort of like recover that upfront cost, or which we call total cost of ownership, it goes above like 5-10 years, and it takes time, because majority of time you will be driving the car within cities, and you would be driving that within 50 to 70 or 80 kilometers of range. So that was there. And then obviously once you are thinking about driving outside of cities, then you need larger charging station infrastructure requirements. So you are not looking just within the city charging stations, but you're also looking outside the cities. Then obviously, like from a performance perspective, and if you want to match cost and performance of an electric vehicle to, let's just say, IC engine, if you match that, then if you're looking at, let's just say, a Honda City that is within a 10 lakh car, but if you look at within a 10 lakh electric car, it used to be, I think, Mahindra Reva back then. They're two different performing vehicle, and in design and performance, everything very different, right? If you match performance, then there is going to be deltas of those 8-10 lakhs coming in, which makes the car very, very unfeasible. I think some of this will happen for India as well. For timing might be 3 to 4 years ahead, when some of the infras will get solved. Your cost of manufacturing, some of that would have come down. There's a much better ecosystem for product right now. Initially, I think your dependency on powertrain or electronics component 3 to 4 years back was majorly like US, China, Taiwan, Europe. These were the companies that were majorly doing some of that. As India would start building some of that, cost would come down, and I think you will have a product in that price range.
I think, yeah. So I think that's, so what, I mean, the way I look at it is, what Amit, you mentioned is an ideal scenario, what India should have. India is, populated, less space. Probably India should not have two vehicle wheelers as well. We should just have metros, buses, and walk. The city design should be such that you don't even need a two-wheeler. But that's an ideal scenario, right? I think, and where Saurabh is coming from is where I sort of have a perspective on what is the reality. We do sell 3 million cars a year, right? In terms of value, that value is higher than the value of 20 million two-wheeler cars, two vehicles sold, right? So as an investor, when I look at the market opportunity is much bigger in cars than two-wheelers when I'm putting my money down. If I look at the total cost of operation, upfront cost plus the diesel fuel burn, maybe commercial vehicle is the biggest opportunity, because a truck, while upfront cost is 10%, the 90% of the cost is actually the fuel, which is burnt over the life of the usage, right? So I think it's really the perspective you come from. Ideally, I think you're right. Ideally, we should not have road accidents. Ideally, we should not have pollution, but all of that is reality of India, right? So within that, as an investor, the way I look at it is electric vehicles are expensive upfront. People who are looking to buy a second car as IC can easily transition to an electric. I mean, they can afford it. They are willing to experiment. That's why when you look at the numbers this year, that's the only segment which has grown in terms of percentage, maybe 100% growth. I'm not 100% sure.
So we're talking about 3,000 cars, sir. I have a next.
No,
It is my second car. Tell me how many people have one car parking in their home. We're talking about the second car park. Second car park.
No,
So
I'm not saying people should buy. I'm not saying
market
people
is
should
very,
buy.
very shallow. And you're talking about selling 10,000 car. Which OEM will invest in toolings in machinery to create a great car which people would love to buy?
Yeah, so 3,000 cars is equal to 20 times a price of an electric two-wheeler, which is equivalent to.
The tooling cost is also 10x than a two-wheeler tooling. How will you justify ROI on the investment you will make as an OEM?
No, so the scale could come over time, right? But what I'm referring to is when you look at the market size, there is a market for 3 million cars today, which has to also transition to electric. It's not that only two-wheelers will transition and cars we will forget, right? We are almost at time. We'll just quickly see one last question. Let's say, I think because, okay, let's pick this question because your point of view is coming from manufacturing side, and that's an artificial constraint that, okay, we have tariffs, so we have to manufacture locally, so you need volume, so that's why manufacturing cannot happen, so cars don't have a market, right? Let's imagine artificial, like Norway, they don't manufacture, look at the number of cars they have, right? So coming to this, but the reality of India is we need manufacturing. So Mr. Gill, coming to you because you have most experience in manufacturing, what challenges still persist in that space, especially in terms of localization of components? One obviously is the scale bit, but are there other specific challenges as well which you want to be addressed by your suppliers?
Well, before that, on the cars, like my members, the remark from them is that the average customer has a wish list which will cost me 25 lakhs, but he wants to pay 10 lakhs. So I keep telling that, okay, let's start from the top. Let's start giving an experience, then come down on the pricing because you can't be on both sides. So I believe the way to go to cars is small volumes, but a great experience of four-wheelers. So perhaps some of the guys are doing it also. As far as the bottlenecks today are concerned, everything is trailing. What is upfront is just volumes. If volumes were there somehow, and that's where you also said, Manoj, that bureaucrats are trying to put strings around what they are trying to give. They don't open up the purse, they just show us the money. So if somehow they were generous, and if somehow the OEMs had the confidence, and we were able to put the first 5 million, everything else will happen. Localization, people will run to give you components, right? So today they're all fence sitters. So I strongly believe somehow the way to go is don't talk of so many strings, so don't talk of so many handicaps here. Let's put somehow, OEMs also have a responsibility of a good product. Policymakers have a responsibility of doing it generously. And the ecosystem has to be also backing up in terms of investments into it. If the first 5 million comes in 3 years, the 50 million will come in the next 10 years, surely. And that's the way to go. And everything else will happen.
Got it. I think that's a great note to end this session. I think if I could summarize it in like 30 seconds, 2020 was like a blip year for electric vehicle adoption, manufacturing in India. But I think going forward, we will, I think, see the trajectory as positive. I think some of the things which Mr. Gill highlighted at the end is hopefully we can get through some of that. I think really just remind government, you already have put the money, let's try to spend it. let's loosen the strings a little bit. And I think at the same time, companies like Euler, with sort of now getting into probably starting manufacturing next year, Yulu expanding to more cities outside Bangalore, Bombay, Delhi, NCR, maybe get into other cities, maybe tier 2 at some point in time where users are much more price sensitive in terms of their ability to buy vehicles, and new technologies with Chogori and companies similar to them developing new technologies which are which really push the performance limits in India and give us the experience which we need in terms of not just meeting, probably beating the ICE, I think, products. And I think more and more players, even on tier 1 component side, which are willing to make the bet and get into the EV component value chain as they come to the board. I think starting next year, we'll hopefully see I think more numbers, and I really wish that in 2025, even if not 23, if we have 5 million in 2025, I'll take it grab it with both hands. Great. I think I'll leave it at that. Rohit, you can quickly conclude, and then
Sure. Thank you all for joining us for today's live session on EV. I hope you enjoyed this session and found it useful. Firstly, I would like to thank our speaker group for taking out the time for their busy schedule for this. We really appreciate the support and apologize for stretching it by a few minutes. But we received a lot of questions, a lot of queries, a lot of excitement around the session. So secondly, I would like to thank our wonderful audience for their inquisitiveness, their attention, their questions. I mean, we received almost 60 odd questions from you guys. We couldn't address them all. I really apologize, but maybe we can have a second episode or a third episode or a fourth episode of this. Why not? And lastly, I wanted to take this time to especially thank our partner Chagori for supporting this session. So thank you all for joining us for our last session of 2020. And we will see you again in the new year for our upcoming session on new electronics, technologies, and trends in the two-wheeler segment on 19 January 2021 at 12 p.m. Do join us for the same. In the meantime, greetings of the season and happy holidays to you all from all of us here at Team CVF and TWF. Thank you all for joining. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Great. Thanks. Bye.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone. Thanks.